Captain Sarah Viper Martinez adjusted her flight suit as she walked across the tarmac at Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. The morning sun cast long shadows between the rows of aircraft, and the familiar smell of jet fuel mixed with desert dust filled her nostrils. At 28, she had already logged over 800 combat hours in her A-10 Thunderbolt II, earning respect among ground troops who knew the distinctive sound of her twin engines meant salvation was coming. The briefing room buzzed with tension as various military personnel gathered for the morning mission update. Sarah found her usual spot near the back, her helmet tucked under her arm, blonde hair pulled back in regulation style. She had learned early in her career that being one of the few female A-10 pilots meant proving herself every single day, not just once. Commander Jack Reaper Thompson strode into the room, his SEAL Team 6 patch visible on his tactical vest. At 6'2" with the kind of weathered face that spoke of countless dangerous missions, he commanded immediate attention from everyone present. His reputation preceded him. 15 years of special operations, multiple deployments, and a record that made other operators envious. The intelligence officer began the briefing with aerial photographs projected on the wall. A high-value target had been located in a remote valley, approximately 40 miles northeast of their current position. The terrain was brutal. Jagged mountains, narrow passes, and limited landing zones that made helicopter insertion nearly impossible during daylight hours. Thompson leaned forward, studying the satellite images with the practiced eye of someone who had planned dozens of similar operations. The target was a weapons cache hidden in a cave system, supplying insurgents. Throughout the region, ground intelligence suggested heavy fortification and multiple escape routes carved into the mountainside. When the discussion turned to air support options, Thompson's voice cut through the room like a blade. He had worked with various aircraft before: F-16s with their speed and precision, Apache helicopters with their devastating firepower, and the occasional F-18 strike package that could level entire compounds in minutes. Sarah watched him dismiss each option with military efficiency. Too fast for proper close air support, limited loiter time over target, restricted by weather conditions. His experience showed as he analyzed each aircraft's capabilities against the mission requirements. Then the briefing officer mentioned A-10 support would be available, and Thompson's expression shifted subtly. Sarah caught the slight smirk that crossed his face, the kind of look that suggested he was humoring someone rather than taking them seriously. She had seen that look before, usually from pilots who flew faster, newer aircraft and considered the A-10 outdated. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately called the Warthog by those who flew and maintained it, was indeed an older aircraft. First flown in the 1970s, it was built around a massive 30mm GA-U-8 cannon that could destroy tanks with depleted uranium rounds. Unlike sleek fighters that prioritized speed and altitude, the A-10 was designed for one purpose: supporting troops on the ground. Thompson's comment came during the tactical discussion about ingress routes. Looking directly at Sarah, he said with barely concealed amusement, "Well, I suppose if we need someone to fly slow circles overhead while we do the real work, the A-10 might be useful. Just try to keep up with the insertion timeline." The room fell quiet for a moment. Other officers exchanged glances, recognizing the subtle challenge in Thompson's words. Sarah felt her jaw tighten slightly, but her expression remained professionally neutral. She had encountered this attitude before: the assumption that because her aircraft was slower and less glamorous, it was somehow less capable, or its pilot less skilled. What Thompson didn't know was that Sarah had graduated top of her class from pilot training, earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for actions during a previous deployment, and had been personally requested by ground commanders who understood what the A-10 could do when properly employed. Her call sign, Viper, wasn't just clever wordplay. It reflected her ability to strike precisely when enemies least expected it. The mission commander outlined the timeline: insertion at 600 hours, with multiple aircraft converging on the target area. Fast-moving jets would conduct initial reconnaissance, helicopters would provide transportation for the SEAL team, and Sarah's A-10 would orbit at a safe distance until called upon for close air support. Thompson stood to address his portion, of the brief, spreading a detailed map across the table. His team would fast rope from helicopters onto a rocky outcropping approximately 2 kilometers from the cave entrance. The terrain was treacherous, with loose shale and limited cover, but it offered the only viable approach that wouldn't expose them to observation from the target area. As he traced potential movement routes with his finger, Thompson's confidence was evident. This was his element. Planning complex operations where split-second timing meant the difference between mission success and casualty reports. His team had executed similar raids across 3 different theaters of operation, and their reputation for precision was well earned. Sarah listened carefully, noting key terrain features and potential threats that might require air support. The cave system opened onto a narrow valley with steep walls on 3 sides, creating natural choke points that could work for or against the ground team depending on circumstances. If the enemy had positioned heavy weapons correctly, the entire approach could become a killing field. During the question and answer session, Thompson addressed concerns about extraction procedures and contingency planning. His answers were thorough and demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking that kept special operations teams alive in hostile territory. But when someone asked about close air support coordination, his response carried a dismissive undertone. Looking toward the back of the room where Sarah sat, Thompson said, "Air support will be available if needed, though I expect we'll be in and out before our slower-moving friends can even get properly positioned. This isn't the kind of mission that requires extended loitering over the battlefield." Sarah recognized the challenge embedded in his words. It wasn't just professional skepticism. It was the kind of doubt that came from working primarily with fast-moving fighters that approached targets at high speed, delivered ordnance, and departed quickly. Thompson clearly viewed air support as either overwhelming firepower delivered from a distance or not particularly relevant to ground operations. The briefing concluded with standard reminders about communication protocols and emergency procedures. As personnel began filing out, Sarah remained seated, reviewing her notes and considering the tactical situation. She understood that tomorrow's mission would be more than just another close air support flight. It would be an opportunity to demonstrate what her aircraft and her skills could contribute to special operations. Thompson paused near her seat as he headed for the exit, his expression mixing professional courtesy with barely concealed skepticism. "Try not to fall too far behind tomorrow, Captain," he said with what might have been intended as humor. "We'll be moving fast and radio chatter needs to stay minimal." Sarah looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "Don't worry about me keeping up, Commander. Just focus on your ground movement. I'll be exactly where you need me when you need me there." Her voice carried quiet confidence without any trace of defensiveness. As the room emptied, Sarah gathered her materials and headed back to the flight line. Tomorrow would prove interesting, and she intended to be thoroughly prepared for whatever the mission might require. The pre-dawn darkness at Bagram Airfield carried the crisp bite of high-altitude desert air, as ground crews conducted final preparations on various aircraft scattered across the flight line. Sarah completed her walk-around inspection of her A-10, checking control surfaces, weapon systems, and the massive GAU-8 cannon that formed the aircraft's centerpiece. Every rivet, every panel, every system had to be perfect when lives depended on precision. Her crew chief, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, approached with the final maintenance forms. A veteran of 6 deployments, Rodriguez understood the A-10 better than most people understood their own cars. "She's running clean, Captain," he reported, handing over the paperwork. "Full combat load, maximum fuel, and I personally verified every round in that gun." Sarah nodded her appreciation. Rodriguez had been maintaining A-10s for over a decade, and his attention to detail had saved more than one mission, when small problems could have become catastrophic failures. The relationship between pilot and crew chief was sacred in military aviation. Mutual trust built through shared understanding that mechanical perfection meant the difference between coming home and becoming a statistic. Across the tarmac, Thompson and his SEAL team conducted their own preparations. The 8-man team moved with economical precision, checking weapons, communications gear, and specialized equipment for the cave assault. Each operator carried over 60 pounds of gear, yet they moved with the fluid efficiency that marked elite units. Sarah watched them load into the waiting helicopters, two MH-60 Blackhawks that would carry the team to their insertion point. The helicopter crews were skilled, but their aircraft were designed for transportation and limited close support. Once on the ground, Thompson's team would rely primarily on their own firepower and whatever fixed-wing support could be coordinated. The mission commander's voice crackled through the radio frequencies as various elements reported ready status. F-16s armed with precision-guided munitions would provide initial reconnaissance and high-altitude overwatch. The helicopters would handle insertion and extraction. Sarah's A-10 would orbit at a designated holding pattern until requested for close air support. As dawn approached, the first wave of aircraft began their departure sequence. The F-16s roared off the runway with afterburners blazing, climbing rapidly toward their cruising altitude. Their speed and modern avionics made them ideal for reconnaissance. They could cover the target area quickly and provide initial assessment of enemy activity. Sarah strapped into her cockpit as the sun painted the eastern mountains in shades of gold and pink. The A-10 systems came online with familiar electronic chirps and status displays. Unlike newer aircraft with touchscreen interfaces and computerized flight management systems, the Warthog's cockpit was refreshingly straightforward. Switches, gauges, and controls that responded immediately to pilot input. Her takeoff was deliberately timed to arrive in the target area simultaneously with the ground insertion. While faster aircraft could cover the distance in minutes, Sarah's flight plan accounted for the A-10's cruising speed and the need to arrive with maximum fuel for extended operations if required. The landscape below transformed from flat desert to increasingly rugged terrain as she flew northeast. Afghanistan's geography was unforgiving. Mountains that soared to over 15,000 feet. Valleys so narrow that aircraft shadows touched both walls simultaneously, and weather patterns that could change from clear skies to zero visibility. Within minutes, radio chatter from the F-16s provided initial reconnaissance reports. The target valley appeared quiet, with no obvious enemy movement or defensive preparations visible from high altitude. Thermal imaging showed several heat signatures near the cave entrance, but they could represent anything from enemy personnel to grazing animals. Thompson's voice came across the tactical frequency as the helicopters approached their insertion point. His tone was professional and calm, the voice of someone who had done this type of operation dozens of times before. Insertion in 2 minutes. Air support elements maintain holding patterns until requested. Ground team will establish security and begin movement toward objective. Sarah acknowledged the radio call while maintaining her assigned orbit pattern approximately 10 miles from the target area. From her position, she could see the helicopters as small dots against the mountainous terrain, moving at high speed, toward the rocky outcropping that would serve as the SEAL team's starting point. The insertion went smoothly. Both helicopters delivered their personnel without incident and departed quickly to avoid providing the enemy with obvious indicators of American activity. Thompson's team was now on their own in hostile territory, beginning a 2-kilometer movement across treacherous terrain toward their objective. For the next hour, Sarah maintained her orbit while monitoring radio frequencies for any indication that close air support might be needed. The F-16s conducted periodic reconnaissance passes, reporting no visible enemy activity. The SEAL team's movement was deliberately slow and careful, using available cover to avoid detection while navigating the rocky approach to the cave system. Thompson's tactical updates were brief and professional. Checkpoint 1, no contact. Proceeding to Checkpoint 2. Military operations often involved long periods of careful preparation, punctuated by brief moments of intense action. The SEAL team's methodical approach reflected their understanding that rushing toward an objective could turn a successful mission into a disaster. Sarah used the quiet time to study her charts and prepare for various contingencies. The valley's terrain created both opportunities and challenges for close air support. The narrow confines meant that any ordnance delivery had to be extremely precise to avoid hitting friendly forces, but the steep walls also provided excellent protection for attack runs from multiple directions. Her weapon systems included a full load of 30mm ammunition for the GAU-8 cannon, 174 rounds of depleted uranium shells capable of destroying armored vehicles or fortified positions. Additionally, she carried AGM-65 Maverick missiles for precision strikes against specific targets, and general-purpose bombs for area denial or destruction of larger structures. The radio crackled with Thompson's next update. Checkpoint 2. Visual contact with objective. Enemy personnel observed. Request air support to establish holding pattern at Point Alpha. Sarah noted his professional tone, but also detected the subtle change that indicated the mission was transitioning from movement to action. She acknowledged the request and adjusted her flight path to position over Point Alpha, a designated coordinate that provided optimal geometry for supporting the ground team's assault. From this position, she could deliver precise fires while maintaining clear sight lines to avoid any possibility of friendly fire incidents. Thompson's next transmission carried more urgency. Multiple enemy personnel confirmed, approximately 12 individuals with small arms and possible crew-served weapons. Preparing for assault. Air support standby for immediate tasking. Sarah checked her weapon systems one final time, ensuring that everything was ready for rapid employment. The mission was about to transition from routine orbit to active combat, and the SEAL team's success might depend on her ability to deliver exactly the right amount of firepower at precisely the right moment. The F-16s had departed for refueling, leaving Sarah as the primary air support asset over the battlefield. Thompson's team was beginning their assault, moving from cover position to cover position as they closed distance with the cave entrance. Radio reports indicated increasing enemy awareness of their presence. Contact. Taking fire from multiple positions. Request immediate close air support. Danger close. Troops in contact. Thompson's voice carried the controlled intensity of a professional under fire, calling for help, while simultaneously directing his team's response to enemy contact. Sarah rolled her aircraft into position for her first attack run, studying the battlefield through her targeting systems. This was the moment that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones, the ability to deliver devastating firepower within meters of friendly forces while operating in confined terrain under combat stress. The SEAL team that had dismissed her aircraft as slow and outdated was about to discover what the A-10 Thunderbolt II could accomplish when piloted by someone who understood its capabilities. The real test was just beginning, and Sarah was ready to demonstrate why ground troops called the A-10 their guardian angel. The sound of automatic weapons fire echoed off the valley walls as Thompson's SEAL team found themselves pinned down behind a rocky outcropping just 300 meters from their objective. What intelligence had described as a lightly defended weapons cache had transformed into a well-prepared defensive position with interlocking fields of fire and carefully positioned machine gun nests. Sarah rolled her A-10 into a steep bank, studying the battlefield through her targeting pod. The narrow valley compressed all activity into a space roughly the size of 2 football fields, with friendly forces marked by infrared strobes visible only through her night vision systems. Enemy positions were revealed by muzzle flashes and the distinctive heat signatures of crew-served weapons. "Viper, this is Reaper 6. Thompson's voice crackled through the radio, stress evident despite his professional training. "We have multiple enemy positions along the ridgeline, approximately 270 degrees from our position. PKM machine guns and possible RPGs. Need you to clear the western approach so we can maneuver." Sarah acknowledged the request, while simultaneously calculating attack geometry, friendly force locations, and terrain masking that would allow her to engage enemy positions without endangering the SEAL team. The margin for error was measured in meters, and any mistake could turn a rescue mission into a friendly fire incident. Unlike the F-16s that had departed earlier, the A-10's design allowed for extended operations at low altitude and slow speed. While faster jets made single high-speed passes and departed, Sarah could establish a combat orbit that kept her continuously available to the ground team. Her aircraft's titanium bathtub protected critical flight systems from ground fire, allowing operations in threat environments that would force other aircraft to maintain safer distances. Rolling inverted, Sarah aligned her aircraft for the first attack run. The GAU-8 cannon's targeting reticle settled on the western ridgeline, where muzzle flashes indicated enemy positions. At precisely the right moment, she squeezed the trigger, sending a 2-second burst of 30mm rounds downrange at a rate of 3,900 rounds per minute. The distinctive sound of the GAU-8 often described as a thunderous belch or the sound of fabric tearing amplified 1,000 times, reverberated through the valley. Each depleted uranium projectile struck with devastating effect, turning rock into shrapnel and silencing the machine gun position that had been preventing the SEAL team's advance. Outstanding. Outstanding. Thompson's voice carried genuine enthusiasm for the first time since the mission began. Direct hit on primary target. Secondary targets along the same ridgeline, approximately 50 meters north of last impact. Sarah pulled her aircraft through a climbing turn, using the valley's terrain to mask her approach for the next attack. Enemy personnel below were learning why the A-10 had earned its reputation as the premier close air support aircraft. Its ability to deliver precision firepower while operating in the same airspace as friendly ground forces. The second attack, Run targeted a different enemy position, this one attempting to relocate after witnessing the destruction of their neighboring fighting position. Sarah's training and experience showed as she adjusted her approach angle to account for the target's movement, delivering another precise burst that eliminated the threat while remaining well clear of friendly force locations. Thompson's team used the breathing space provided by air support to begin maneuvering toward their objective. Military tactics often involved combined arms coordination, ground forces and air support working together to achieve objectives that neither could accomplish independently. The SEAL team's advanced training and Sarah's precision flying created the kind of synergy that made complex operations successful. Reaper 6, be advised you have additional enemy personnel emerging from the cave system. Count approximately 8 individuals with small arms, moving toward defensive positions on the eastern slope. Sarah's elevated position provided her with battlefield awareness that complemented the ground team's tactical perspective. Thompson acknowledged her report while directing his team's movement. The combination of ground-level tactical understanding and aerial battlefield observation created a comprehensive picture of enemy activity and terrain that enhanced everyone's effectiveness. This was combined arms coordination at its finest, each element contributing unique capabilities toward shared objectives. The enemy's response to air support revealed sophisticated tactical understanding. Rather than remaining in fixed positions, where they could be easily targeted, they began using covered movement routes and attempting to establish new firing positions that would threaten both the aircraft and the ground team. This was not a group of poorly trained insurgents but experienced fighters who understood how to counter air support. Sarah's next attack run targeted enemy personnel attempting to establish an RPG position that could threaten her aircraft or the SEAL team. The narrow valley created complex ballistics problems. Wind effects, altitude variations, and terrain masking all influenced weapon delivery. Her training in the A-10's unique flight characteristics allowed her to compensate for these factors while maintaining the precision necessary for danger-close operations. The GAU-8's rounds struck precisely where intended, eliminating the RPG threat and forcing remaining enemy personnel to seek better cover. Each successful engagement reduced the enemy's ability to coordinate defensive fires, while providing Thompson's team with opportunities to advance toward their objective. Viper, this is Reaper 6. We're beginning final approach to the cave entrance. Negative on further air support at this time, but stay close. If we need extraction support, it's going to be immediate and danger close. Thompson's message indicated that the ground assault was entering its most critical phase. Sarah acknowledged while establishing a tight orbit that kept the objective area constantly within her targeting system's range. The SEAL team disappeared from her view as they moved into the cave system, leaving her to monitor external approaches and watch for any enemy reinforcements that might threaten the operation. Radio communications shifted to brief, coded transmissions as Thompson's team conducted room-to-room clearing inside the cave complex. Sarah maintained her orbit, ready to respond immediately if the ground team encountered more resistance than they could handle independently. The success of special operations often depended on having overwhelming support available, even if it ultimately wasn't needed. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Sarah waited for updates from the cave assault. Her fuel gauges showed sufficient reserves for extended operations, but she knew that Murphy's Law applied especially to combat missions. Whatever could go wrong would go wrong at the worst possible moment. Thompson's voice finally returned, to the radio frequency, carrying the controlled excitement of someone who had discovered something significant. Viper, Reaper 6. We've secured the objective and discovered materials beyond original intelligence estimates. This is a major supply depot, not just a small cache. We're going to need extended time on target for documentation and destruction, Sarah acknowledged while checking her fuel state and ammunition remaining. Extended operations meant potential for additional enemy contact as word of American activity spread throughout the area. The longer the SEAL team remained on the ground, the more likely that enemy reinforcements would arrive to contest their presence. Her concerns proved justified when movement along the valley's northern approach caught her attention. Through her targeting systems, she could see a group of vehicles moving at high speed toward the objective area. The thermal signatures suggested technical vehicles, pickup trucks with mounted weapons that represented a significant threat to the lightly armed SEAL team. Reaper 6, Viper. Be advised you have multiple vehicles approaching from the north, approximately 2 kilometers out and closing fast. Looks like enemy reinforcements with crew-served weapons. Request permission to engage. Thompson's response came immediately. Viper, cleared to engage all hostile vehicles. We need that approach route clear for extraction. The mission was entering a new phase, with Sarah's role shifting from precise close air support to area denial against enemy reinforcements. This was exactly the type of situation where the A-10's design philosophy proved its worth. While faster jets would deliver their ordnance and depart, Sarah could remain over the battlefield for extended periods, engaging multiple targets and providing continuous support until the ground team completed their mission. The convoy of enemy vehicles moved with purpose along the winding mountain road, kicking up clouds of dust that made them visible from miles away. Sarah counted 6 vehicles, 4 pickup trucks with heavy machine guns mounted in their beds, and 2 larger trucks that likely carried additional personnel and weapons. The tactical situation was shifting rapidly from a surgical strike to a developing firefight with multiple enemy elements. Banking her A-10 into position for the attack run, Sarah calculated the optimal approach that would allow her to engage the convoy before it could reach defensive positions near the cave complex. The winding road created natural choke points where the vehicles would be unable to disperse, making them vulnerable to air attack, but also creating challenges for precision weapon delivery. Reaper 6, Viper. Beginning attack run on enemy convoy. Recommend you prepare for possible contact from dismounted personnel if any vehicles reach your position. Sarah's radio call warned Thompson while she aligned her aircraft for the first pass. The GAU-8 cannon's distinctive roar echoed across the valley as Sarah engaged the lead vehicle with a sustained burst. The 30mm rounds tore through the truck's engine block and cab, sending it careening off the narrow road to crash among the rocks below. Secondary explosions indicated the vehicle had been carrying additional ammunition or fuel. Enemy personnel in the remaining vehicles scattered, some taking cover behind their trucks, while others attempted to establish defensive positions among the roadside rocks. Their response showed military training. They understood that remaining with the vehicles made them easy targets for continued air attack. Sarah pulled her aircraft through a climbing turn, using the terrain to mask her approach for the next attack run. The surviving vehicles were attempting to disperse, with drivers seeking any available cover that might protect them from further airstrikes. The narrow mountain road limited their options, but experienced fighters could still make targeting difficult through proper use of terrain. The second attack run targeted a cluster of vehicles that had stopped near a rocky outcropping. Sarah's targeting reticle settled on the largest truck, which thermal imaging suggested contained the most personnel. The GAU-8's rounds struck with devastating precision, eliminating the vehicle and forcing nearby enemy personnel to abandon their positions. Outstanding work, Viper. That's 2 down, but we're starting to see movement around the cave entrance. Some of those guys made it closer than we wanted. Thompson's radio update indicated that the situation on the ground was becoming more complex, with enemy forces potentially threatening the SEAL team's position. Sarah acknowledged while scanning for additional targets. The remaining vehicles had scattered enough to make simultaneous engagement difficult, but individual attacks could eliminate them systematically. Her ammunition state remained good, with plenty of 30mm rounds available for continued engagement. Movement near the cave entrance caught her attention through the targeting pod. Several enemy personnel were attempting to establish firing positions that would threaten the SEAL team's exit routes. These fighters had likely dismounted from the convoy before Sarah's attack and moved on foot to reach advanced positions. Reaper, 6. I've got eyes on approximately 4 enemy personnel establishing positions near your extraction route. Recommend you deal with internal cave objectives quickly while I handle external threats. Sarah's battlefield awareness from her elevated position provided critical intelligence for the ground team's tactical decisions. Rolling into another attack run, Sarah shifted her focus from vehicles to individual personnel targets. This type of engagement required even greater precision, as the enemy fighters were now using the same rocky terrain that provided concealment for the SEAL team. Distinguishing between friendly and enemy forces became critical, with only thermal signatures and position correlation preventing friendly fire incidents. The GAU-8's round struck precisely where intended, eliminating the enemy fighting position, while remaining well clear of the cave entrance where Thompson's team continued their mission. Each successful engagement reduced the external threats that could complicate the SEAL team's extraction. Thompson's voice returned to the radio, with an update that changed the entire tactical situation. Viper, Reaper 6, we've completed documentation of the weapons cache, but we've discovered something that changes our extraction timeline. This facility contains materials that suggest a much larger operation than originally assessed. Higher Headquarters is directing us to expand the search and destroy mission, Sarah acknowledged while maintaining her combat orbit. Extended ground operations meant increased vulnerability to enemy reinforcements, additional fuel consumption for her aircraft, and higher probability of complications that could turn a successful mission into a rescue operation. The risk versus reward calculation was shifting, but that decision belonged to commanders with broader strategic perspective. Her targeting systems detected additional movement along the valley's approaches. More vehicles were visible in the distance, suggesting that word of American activity was spreading throughout the area. Enemy forces were converging on the location, potentially creating a situation where the SEAL team could become outnumbered and surrounded. Reaper 6. Be advised, I'm tracking additional enemy vehicles approaching from multiple directions. Count at least 8 more vehicles approximately 15 minutes out at current speed. We may need to expedite your timeline or call in additional air support. Sarah's report provided critical information for tactical decision-making. Thompson's response reflected the complex calculations that special operations leaders made constantly. Viper understood. We need approximately 30 more minutes to complete the expanded mission. Can you keep the approaches clear that long? Sarah quickly calculated her fuel state, ammunition remaining, and the tactical situation. Her A-10 carried enough fuel for extended operations, and her ammunition load remained adequate for engaging multiple vehicle targets. The question was whether one aircraft could effectively control all approaches to the valley against determined enemy forces. Affirm, Reaper 6. I can maintain coverage, but recommend we request additional air support as backup in case the situation escalates beyond what one aircraft can handle. Military planning always included contingencies for situations that exceeded original estimates. The radio crackled with Thompson's acknowledgement before returning to internal team communications for the expanded cave search. Sarah settled into a wider orbit pattern that allowed her to monitor all approaches to the valley, while remaining available for immediate close air support if the ground team encountered additional resistance. Her next series of attack runs targeted the scattered remnants of the original convoy. Individual vehicles and personnel positions fell to precisely delivered 30mm rounds, each engagement reducing the enemy's ability to coordinate effective resistance. The A-10's design allowed for this type of sustained combat operations that would be impossible for faster, less robust aircraft. Minutes later, Sarah's worst fears materialized when her targeting systems detected the approaching reinforcements reaching effective engagement range. 8 vehicles moving in tactical formation along 3 different routes, clearly coordinated and possibly equipped with anti-aircraft weapons that could threaten her operations. Reaper 6, Viper. Enemy reinforcements have reached the outer perimeter. Beginning engagement, but this is going to get busy fast. How's your timeline looking? Sarah's radio call carried the controlled tension of a pilot facing increasing odds while maintaining professional composure. Thompson's response came immediately, recognizing the changing tactical situation. Viper, we're at 60% completion on the expanded mission. If you need us to compress the timeline, we can prioritize critical targets and prepare for extraction. Sarah rolled into position for engaging the new wave of enemy forces while simultaneously calculating fuel consumption, ammunition expenditure, and the tactical geometry required to maintain effective coverage of multiple approaches. The mission was entering its most critical phase, where split-second decisions could determine success or failure. The first engagement against the reinforcing convoy demonstrated the enemy's improved tactics. Instead of bunching together on narrow roads, these vehicles approached using dispersed formation and combined movement, with dismounted personnel who could establish supporting positions. Sarah's attack runs faced return fire from multiple directions, indicating that these were experienced fighters with anti-aircraft training. Despite the increased complexity, Sarah's training and the A-10's capabilities allowed her to maintain effective air support while engaging multiple enemy elements simultaneously. Each successful attack reduced the pressure on Thompson's team while buying additional time for mission completion. The battlefield had transformed into a complex three-dimensional chess game, with Sarah controlling the airspace above, while Thompson's SEAL team worked methodically through the expanded cave system below. Enemy forces were now approaching from 4 different directions, their coordination suggesting experienced leadership and communication capabilities that exceeded original intelligence estimates. Sarah's targeting systems tracked multiple threats simultaneously as she prioritized engagements based on proximity to the SEAL team's position and the relative threat each enemy element posed. The closest group had dismounted from their vehicles and was attempting to establish fighting positions within small arms range of the cave entrance, making them the highest priority target. Rolling her A-10 into a steep diving attack, Sarah lined up on the advancing enemy personnel. The GAU-8 cannon's rounds struck with devastating precision, sending geysers of pulverized rock and shrapnel across the enemy position. The survivors scattered, seeking whatever cover the rocky terrain could provide, but their advance toward the cave entrance had been effectively halted. Viper, outstanding work. That group was getting uncomfortably close to our exit route. Thompson's voice carried genuine appreciation as his team continued their systematic search and destruction of the weapons cache. We've uncovered communications equipment and documents that suggest this was a regional coordination center, not just a supply depot. The tactical implications were significant. Regional coordination centers represented high-value targets that justified increased risk and extended operations. Sarah acknowledged the information, while simultaneously engaging another enemy vehicle that had attempted to use dead ground to approach undetected. Her elevated position and advanced targeting systems made such attempts futile. Enemy return fire was becoming more accurate and coordinated. Several rounds passed close enough to Sarah's aircraft to be heard above the engine noise, and her defensive systems detected radar emissions suggesting possible surface-to-air missile threats. The enemy was adapting to her attack patterns and bringing more sophisticated weapons to bear. Banking sharply to avoid a suspected missile launch, Sarah used the valley's terrain to break radar lock while repositioning for her next attack run. The A-10's design philosophy emphasized survivability in hostile environments, with redundant flight systems and armor protection that allowed operations in threat levels that would force other aircraft to withdraw. Reaper 6, be advised I'm taking increasingly heavy return fire and detecting possible SAM threats. We may need to consider extraction options if this tactical situation continues to escalate. Sarah's professional assessment balanced mission requirements against aircraft survivability and pilot safety. Thompson's response reflected the complex risk calculations that special operations commanders made constantly. Viper, we've reached approximately 80% completion on priority objectives. If you can give us 15 more minutes, we can complete critical tasks and prepare for extraction. 15 minutes in combat time could feel like hours, especially when facing coordinated enemy forces with improving weapon systems. Sarah calculated her remaining ammunition, fuel state, and the tactical geometry required to maintain effective coverage. The numbers suggested she could continue operations, but with increasingly narrow safety margins. Her next series of attack runs targeted the enemy vehicles that posed the greatest threat to continued air operations. Anti-aircraft weapons, mounted on trucks, represented existential threats that had to be eliminated before they could achieve effective engagement parameters. Sarah's approach angles became more aggressive, trading increased exposure to ground fire for better targeting opportunities. The GAU-8's distinctive sound echoed continuously across the valley as Sarah engaged target after target. Each successful attack eliminated specific threats while demonstrating to remaining enemy forces the cost of approaching within effective range. The psychological impact of sustained, accurate air support often proved as valuable as the physical destruction of equipment and personnel. Suddenly, Thompson's voice crackled through the radio with an urgency that indicated immediate danger. "Viper Reaper 6, we've got a problem down here. The cave system connects to a much larger complex, and we're taking fire from multiple directions inside the tunnels. We need immediate extraction support, but the LZ is going to be hot." Sarah's tactical assessment shifted instantly from area denial to close air support for extraction under fire. The SEAL team was in immediate danger, trapped in a confined space, with enemy forces closing from multiple directions. Their survival depended. The flight back to Bagram Airfield gave Sarah time to process the intensity of the morning's combat operations. Her A-10 had taken multiple hits from enemy fire, with several holes visible in the wings and fuselage, but the aircraft's robust design had protected all critical systems. The distinctive whine of the twin engines remained steady and reassuring as she maintained course through the Afghan mountains. Radio chatter from other aircraft in the area painted a picture of the morning's significance. Intelligence personnel were already analyzing the materials recovered by Thompson's team, and initial assessments suggested the cave complex had been a major coordination center for insurgent activities throughout the region. The expanded mission that had seemed like a complication had actually uncovered intelligence that could prevent future attacks on coalition forces. As Bagram's runway came into view, Sarah began her approach checklist with the methodical precision that had characterized her entire flying career. The tower cleared her for immediate landing, prioritizing combat aircraft returning from missions over routine training flights. Ground crews were already positioning fire trucks and maintenance personnel in case the battle damage required emergency response. The landing was smooth despite the aircraft damage, testament to the A-10's forgiving flight characteristics and redundant control systems. As Sarah taxied toward the parking area, she could see Thompson and his SEAL team disembarking from their helicopters at the Special Operations Terminal. Even at a distance, their professional demeanor suggested successful mission completion and no casualties. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was waiting as Sarah shut down the engines and completed her post-flight inspection. His experienced eye immediately cataloged the battle damage, multiple bullet holes, some shrapnel scoring, and evidence of near misses that had come uncomfortably close to critical systems. Yet his expression carried satisfaction rather than concern, knowing that his aircraft had performed exactly as designed. "Looks like you had an interesting morning, Captain," Rodriguez observed, while beginning his initial damage assessment. "Nothing here that can't be fixed, and she brought you home safe. That's what counts." His professional evaluation would determine whether the aircraft needed immediate maintenance or could return to flight status after routine repairs. Sarah completed her mission debrief with intelligence officers who were already correlating her battlefield observations with information recovered by the SEAL team. Her aerial perspective had provided crucial details about enemy tactics, weapon systems, and coordination capabilities that complemented the ground team's findings. Combined, the information would enhance future operations throughout the region. The formal debriefing took place in the same conference room where the morning's mission had been planned, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Officers who had witnessed radio transmissions during the combat phase understood that something exceptional had occurred, and Sarah's professional demeanor during questioning reinforced their assessment of her performance. When Thompson entered the debriefing room, his presence commanded immediate attention from everyone present. Still wearing his combat gear with the dust and cordite residue that marked recent action, He carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from successful completion of dangerous missions. His first words were directed specifically at, "Sarah, Captain Martinez, I owe you an apology and my team owes you their lives." Thompson's statement carried the weight of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions under extreme pressure. "This morning I questioned your aircraft's capabilities and your role in our mission. After today's events, I understand why ground forces request A-10 support whenever possible." Sarah accepted his acknowledgement with the professional grace that had characterized her entire military career. "Commander, we all have preconceptions based on our training and experience. What matters is mission accomplishment and bringing everyone home safely. Your team performed exceptionally under difficult circumstances." Thompson's detailed account of the ground mission provided context for Sarah's air support activities. The weapons cache had indeed been much larger than originally assessed, with communications equipment and documentation indicating regional coordination responsibilities that made the target strategically significant. The SEAL teams expanded. Search had uncovered materials that would impact operations throughout Afghanistan. But Thompson's most significant revelation concerned the tactical situation that had developed during the mission. "When we found ourselves trapped in that cave complex with enemy forces converging from multiple directions, I honestly thought we might not make it out," he admitted to the room. Captain Martinez's ability to provide continuous, precise, close air support while managing multiple threats simultaneously was the determining factor in our survival. The intelligence officer leading the debriefing asked specific questions about enemy tactics, weapon systems, and coordination capabilities that both Sarah and Thompson had observed. Their combined perspective, aerial and ground level, provided a comprehensive assessment that would inform future operations and tactical planning. Sarah's description of the enemy's anti-aircraft capabilities revealed significant intelligence about weapons systems and training levels. The coordinated approach of multiple vehicle convoys, sophisticated use of terrain for concealment, and increasing accuracy of return fire suggested well-trained opponents with experience fighting coalition air power. Thompson's team had documented the cave complex thoroughly before the tactical situation forced their emergency extraction. Photographs and recovered materials indicated the facility had been operational for months, coordinating supply distribution and attack planning across multiple provinces. Its destruction would significantly disrupt insurgent operations throughout the region. The mission commander who had briefed the morning's operation provided his assessment during the debriefing. "This type of close air support under extreme conditions represents exactly why the A-10 platform remains irreplaceable for ground support missions. Captain Martinez's performance today exemplifies the highest standards of combat aviation." As the formal debriefing concluded, Thompson approached Sarah privately. His expression carried the sincerity that came from shared combat experience and mutual professional respect, earned through dangerous circumstances. "Captain, I want you to know that my earlier comments about your aircraft weren't just wrong. They were ignorant. I've worked with various air support platforms, but I've never seen sustained precision under fire like what you provided today." Sarah appreciated his candor while recognizing the broader implications of their successful cooperation. "Commander, special operations and close air support require trust and coordination that can only be built through shared experience. Today proved that when both elements understand their roles and capabilities, the combination becomes incredibly effective." Thompson nodded his agreement, then added something that surprised Sarah with its personal nature. "I'm going to make sure that higher headquarters understands exactly what happened today and how your performance made the difference between mission success and potential disaster. You've earned recognition for exceptional flying under combat conditions." The conversation was interrupted by Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approaching with his damage assessment report. The A-10 had sustained 17 bullet holes of various calibers, multiple areas of shrapnel damage, and evidence of several near misses from larger weapon systems. Yet all critical flight systems remained fully operational, validating the aircraft's legendary reputation for survivability. "She'll be ready to fly again tomorrow morning, Captain," Rodriguez reported with obvious pride in his aircraft and its performance. "A few patches, some system checks, and she'll be good as new. This old bird knows how to take care of her pilot." His assessment reflected the deep bond between maintenance personnel and the aircraft they supported. As evening approached at Bagram Airfield, Sarah found herself reflecting on the day's events while watching the sunset paint the Afghan mountains in shades of gold and red. The morning's mission had begun with professional skepticism about her aircraft's relevance to special operations and had concluded with demonstrated proof of the A-10's unique capabilities. Thompson's SEAL team had recovered intelligence that would save coalition lives and disrupt enemy operations for months to come. Sarah's close air support had enabled mission success while protecting American personnel during some of the most dangerous phases of the operation. Together, they had proven that combined arms coordination could overcome significant tactical challenges. The broader implications extended beyond a single successful mission. Thompson's newfound respect for A-10 capabilities would influence future special operations planning, potentially leading to increased integration between SEAL teams and close air support platforms. Professional relationships built through shared combat experience often had lasting impact on tactical doctrine and operational planning. As Sarah prepared for the next day's flying schedule, she carried satisfaction that came from exceptional performance under extreme conditions. The SEAL who had scoffed at her slow aircraft now understood why the A-10 Thunderbolt II remained the premier close air support platform